The rain played a hollow rhythm on the roof of the American Red Cross office in Boston, matching the metronome-like tap of Michael Janssen's fingers on the oak desk. Autumn of 1955 had brought unseasonable storms, and the water streaked down the windows, distorting the world outside. "These are the last of the displacement records from Berlin, Mr. Janssen," said Mrs. Winters, placing a stack of faded manila folders before him. "Though I doubt you'll find anything new after all this time." Michael nodded, his eyes never leaving the pile. "Thank you. I know it seems foolish." The elderly secretary's expression softened. 10 years isn't so long, not when it matters. When she left, Michael loosened his tie and opened the first folder. The familiar ritual, skimming names, locations, dates, had become a monthly pilgrimage. Hospital records, refugee registrations, displaced persons lists. Paper fragments of shattered lives. He'd been with the 101st Airborne, a medic dropped into Normandy on D-Day who somehow survived to see Berlin fall. Now at 35, his medical practice in Boston kept him comfortable but hollow. The war had taken something from him that peacetime couldn't replace. For hours later, eyes burning, he reached for the final folder. Its red tab was frayed, indicating it had been consulted many times. Temporary medical personnel, Women's Auxiliary Corps, Bavaria region, 1944 to 1945. Something in his chest tightened. He'd seen dozens of such files, but as he flipped through the yellowing pages, a name leapt out at him. Grace Calloway. Nurse. American volunteer. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. The sound came to him distantly, as though from another room, another life. Grace. Bavaria, December 1940. The field hospital was a converted schoolhouse 5 miles behind the front lines. Michael had been transferred there after taking shrapnel in his leg during the push toward the Rhine. The wound wasn't severe, but it had become infected, landing him in a narrow bed among dozens of others. "You're lucky, Lieutenant," said the doctor who examined him. "A few more days with that infection and you'd be minus a leg." "Just what every man wants to hear, sir," Michael replied, earning a tired chuckle. "You'll be in good hands. We've got some volunteers from the Red Cross who know what they're doing. Unlike some of these kids they're sending us now." The fever made the days blur together. Sometimes Michael thought he was back home in Massachusetts, watching snow fall on the orchard behind his parents' house. Other times, he was in the belly of a CR-47 again, waiting to jump into darkness. He first saw her during one such fever dream. A cool hand on his forehead, a soft voice saying, "Easy now, Lieutenant. You're safe." When he opened his eyes, he glimpsed auburn hair tucked under a nurse's cap, serious green eyes, and a dusting of freckles across pale skin. "Am I dead?" he whispered. It seemed the only explanation for such a vision. She smiled, and the lines of weariness around her eyes crinkled. "Not yet, though you've been giving it your best shot." Later, when the fever broke, she came to check his bandages. "I'm Nurse Calloway," she said. "But you can call me Grace, since you've already told me your life story." Michael winced. "I talked during the fever." Quite eloquently. She changed his dressing with practiced hands. "I know all about your dog Rex, your mother's apple pie, and your ambitions to become a doctor after the war." He studied her in the dim light. She was perhaps 25, with a calm efficiency that came from experience. Not beautiful in the movie star sense, but striking, with a quiet dignity that made the men around her sit straighter when she passed. "How much of what I said was embarrassing?" "Only about half," she said, but her smile took the sting from the words. The rest was rather sweet. In the evenings when her shift ended, she would sometimes sit with him. The hospital was understaffed, and most of the nurses were running on empty, but Grace always found a few moments. She'd brought books from home, Hemingway, Steinbeck, Fitzgerald, and would read aloud to those who couldn't sleep. "You're not what I expected," Michael told her one night after she finished a chapter of The Great Gatsby. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Most volunteers are either terrified society girls or grandmothers." Grace's expression turned distant. I was a nurse in Philadelphia before. After Pearl Harbor, my brother enlisted. He died at Guadalcanal. I felt I needed to do something. Her simple words hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken grief. I'm sorry, Michael said, inadequately. We all have our reasons for being here. She tucked the book under her arm. Some better than others. As Christmas approached, Michael's leg healed enough for him to help in the hospital. Having trained as a medic, he was more skilled than many of the volunteers. He and Grace worked side by side during the influx of casualties from the Battle of the Bulge. On Christmas Eve, after an 18-hour shift, they found themselves alone in the supply room, inventorying plasma. The small space was cold, their breath clouding before them. Will you go back to Philadelphia? Michael asked, breaking the companionable silence. After, I mean. Grace continued counting bandages. I don't know. Everything there reminds me of Thomas, my brother. My parents want me home, of course. You could come to Boston, Michael said, the words escaping before he could consider them. Massachusetts General is a fine hospital. I could put in a word when I finish medical school. She looked up, surprised. Then her expression softened. You're very kind, Lieutenant Janssen. Michael, he corrected. Please. Michael. The way she said his name made something inside him unfold. Let's get through this war first, shall we? A siren wailed outside, incoming aircraft. The lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, Michael felt Grace's hand find his, steady and warm. Under the desk, he whispered, guiding her to shelter as the first bombs fell. They huddled together as the building shook. Dust rained down, and somewhere glass shattered. Michael pulled her closer, covering her body with his. I'm supposed to be the one keeping you alive, she said against his chest. Not the other way around. We'll take turns, he replied. When the all-clear sounded an hour later, they emerged to find part of the hospital's east wing destroyed. The night became a blur of moving patients, treating new wounds, and searching for survivors in the rubble. Dawn broke cold and clear. Michael found Grace outside, staring at the devastation, her uniform stained with blood and soot. Without speaking, he draped his jacket around her shoulders. 7 dead, she said. 3 were children from the village who'd come for the Christmas service. Michael had no response. The war's cruelty had long since exceeded his capacity for understanding. I keep thinking I'll become numb to it, Grace continued. But I never do. I hope you never do, he said quietly. That's what makes you, he stopped, unable to find the right word. She turned to him then, her face drawn with exhaustion but her eyes clear. What? Human, he finished. When so much around us isn't. Grace studied him for a long moment, then reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with unexpected tenderness. You should get some rest, she said finally. We'll need you tomorrow. But the next day, orders came. The 101st needed medics as they pushed into Germany. Michael's leg was deemed sufficiently healed. He found Grace in the makeshift chapel, arranging flowers someone had brought from a bombed-out greenhouse. I've been reassigned, he said simply. She nodded, not turning around. I heard. I leave in an hour. Her hand stilled on the wilting blossoms. So soon. Grace, the words tangled in his throat. She faced him then, her expression carefully composed. You'll be careful, won't you? I've put too much work into that leg to have you waste it. Michael stepped closer. When this is over, don't, she interrupted. Don't make promises. Not now. Then at least take this. He pressed his dog tags into her hand. One of them. It's not regulation, but I can't accept this, she said, trying to give it back. Please. For luck. He closed her fingers around the metal. My address in Boston is on my file. When the war ends, if you want to find me. Grace's composure wavered. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver pin, a caduceus, the symbol of medicine. "It was my grandfather's," she said, pinning it to the inside of his jacket. "He was a doctor in the Great War. Bring it back to me." Michael couldn't help himself. He leaned down and kissed her, briefly but with all the feeling he couldn't express. Her lips were soft against his, tasting faintly of coffee and something uniquely her. When they parted, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I will find you," he promised. "When this is over." But the chaos of war had other plans. The final German offensive sent cascades of wounded to their hospital. 2 weeks after Michael left, Grace was transferred to a forward aid station that was subsequently overrun. Reports listed her as missing, possibly captured. Michael, now advancing with Allied forces into the German heartland, heard only rumors. Letters he sent through official channels went unanswered. By the time Berlin fell and the war in Europe ended, the hospital where they'd met had been disbanded, its personnel scattered across the continent. He returned to Boston, completed medical school as planned, and began building a practice. But each year on Christmas Eve, he would inquire with the Red Cross about Grace Calloway, nurse, Women's Auxiliary Corps. Each year brought nothing. Until now. Boston, November 1955. The Red Cross file contained only basic information. Grace had been captured during the German counteroffensive, then liberated when Soviet forces overran the area. She had suffered exposure and malnutrition but survived. After repatriation, she had returned not to Philadelphia but to her mother's hometown, Worcester, Massachusetts, less than 50 miles from where Michael had spent the past decade searching records from Europe. The irony might have been amusing if it didn't make his chest ache. The file listed an address from 1946. It would almost certainly be outdated, but it was a start. Michael drove to Worcester the next morning, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the persistent rain. The address led to a small bungalow with blue shutters and a well-tended garden, now dormant for winter. An elderly woman answered his knock. "I'm looking for Grace Calloway," Michael said, his heart hammering. "She may have lived here after the war." The woman eyed him suspiciously. "Who's asking?" "My name is Michael Janssen. I knew her in Germany. During the war." Something in his voice must have conveyed his sincerity, because the woman's expression softened. "Gracie moved to Boston 5 years ago," she said. "This was her aunt's house. I bought it when the poor dear passed." Michael felt lightheaded. "Boston? Do you know where?" "She works at Children's Hospital. Head nurse in the pediatric ward." The woman smiled faintly. "Never married, though not for lack of offers, from what her aunt told me." Michael thanked her and drove back to Boston in a daze, the world beyond his windshield a blur of autumn colors and rain. He knew Children's Hospital well, it was less than 2 miles from his own practice. For 10 years, they had been living in the same city. Passing on the same streets. Perhaps even riding the same trolleys. The hospital's reception area was bright and modern, with colorful murals of storybook characters adorning the walls. "I'm here to see Nurse Calloway," Michael told the young woman at the desk, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No, it's personal. I'm an old friend." The receptionist hesitated, then reached for the telephone. "Your name, sir?" Michael almost gave it, then stopped himself. "Just tell her it's about a caduceus pin. From Bavaria." He waited in the small visitors' area, watching rain streak the windows. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He began to wonder if she would come at all, or if the message had meant nothing to her. Then he heard footsteps behind him, and a familiar voice, older, perhaps, but unmistakable. "I never thought you'd come looking for me with my own pin." Michael turned slowly. Grace stood before him, her auburn hair now streaked with a few strands of silver, her green eyes just as serious, the freckles a bit more pronounced across her still fair skin. She wore a crisp white uniform, a head nurse's insignia on her collar. "I lost it," he said simply. "In Berlin, the last week of the war. Our unit was hit by artillery. I woke up in a field hospital. Everything I had was gone. Grace's expression remained careful, guarded. I heard you were killed. What? In Berlin. May 1945. She took a small step forward. The Red Cross had you on a casualty list. I saw it myself. The revelation struck him like a physical blow. All these years, while he had been searching for her, she had believed him dead. I was unconscious for 3 days, he said quietly. They must have made a mistake. For a time, I wrote to your parents in Boston, Grace continued. But their letters were returned. The house had been sold. They moved to Florida in '47, Michael said. My father's heart couldn't take another New England winter. The space between them seemed to vibrate with all that remained unsaid. Outside, the rain continued its steady patter. And you've been in Boston all this time? Grace asked finally. I have a practice on Commonwealth Avenue. General medicine. He paused. I looked for you. Every year, I checked with the Red Cross for updated displacement records. And I've been right here. A small, sad smile touched her lips. Life has a strange sense of humor. Grace, Michael stopped, uncertain of his right to disrupt her life after all this time. I should go. I just wanted to know you were all right. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Did you bring it with you? Michael looked back. Bring what? My grandfather's pin. You promised to return it. Despite everything, he laughed, a short, surprised sound. I told you, I lost it in Berlin. Grace stepped closer, until he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, earned from years of caring and concern. Then you still owe me, Lieutenant Janssen, she said softly. And I've been waiting a very long time to collect. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. From behind his identification, he carefully extracted a worn metal dog tag on a tarnished chain. You kept it, Grace whispered, taking the tag from him. Her fingers brushed his, sending the same jolt through him that he'd felt in that supply room on Christmas Eve, 1944. I thought you might want it back, he said. I kept yours, too. She reached beneath her collar and pulled out a chain, his remaining dog tag hanging from it alongside a plain gold cross. For luck. Does it still work? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. The luck? Grace studied him for a long moment, her eyes taking in the changes a decade had wrought. Then slowly, deliberately, she reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, just as they had that morning outside the bombed hospital. I suppose we're about to find out, she said. They walked through the public garden as the rain tapered to a drizzle. Yellow leaves clung to wet pathways, and the afternoon light filtered weakly through breaking clouds. I married once, Grace said suddenly as they crossed the small footbridge. In 1947. A doctor from the hospital in Philadelphia where I worked after coming home. Michael felt a cold weight settle in his stomach, but he kept his face neutral. I see. He was a good man. Kind. Stable. She kept her eyes on the path ahead. He died 2 years later. Polio epidemic. I'm sorry, Michael said, and meant it. After that, I moved here. Started over. She glanced at him. What about you? A successful doctor like yourself must have had opportunities. There were relationships, he acknowledged. Nothing that lasted. They walked in silence for a while, adjusting to the presence of each other after so long imagining it. Do you ever think about it? Grace asked finally. The war. Every day, Michael answered truthfully. Not the fighting so much anymore. But the people. The ones I couldn't save. The ones I did. You were a good medic. The men trusted you. And you were the finest nurse I ever saw. Still are, I'd wager. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. The children are easier patients than soldiers. Less colorful language. Michael laughed. I imagined so. They reached a bench overlooking the small lake, and Grace sat down. Michael joined her, careful to leave space between them. Why didn't you look for me? He asked after a moment. After you learned I was supposedly dead. Grace considered the question. At first, I was still in Europe, trying to get home. Then when I finally saw the casualty list, I'd already lost so much. My brother. Friends. I think I needed to believe some promises would be kept, even if only in memory. She turned to look at him directly. If you died keeping your word, trying to find me, then it meant something. That not everything good had been destroyed. Michael understood. It wasn't logical, perhaps, but war stripped logic away, leaving only the raw human need to make meaning from chaos. And now, he asked quietly. Now I don't know what to think, Grace admitted. 10 years is a long time, Michael. We're different people. Yes, he agreed. But some things don't change. From his coat pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. He'd stopped at his apartment before coming to the hospital, retrieving the item from the box of war mementos he kept locked in his desk. What's this? Grace asked, taking it hesitantly. Open it. She unwrapped the paper to reveal a small silver caduceus pin, tarnished and bent, with one of its wings broken off entirely. But you said, I said I lost it in Berlin, Michael explained. And I did. But 3 months after I came home, I received a package. A German doctor had found it in the ruins of the field hospital where I'd been treated. He'd seen my name engraved on the back. Grace turned the pin over. There, in tiny letters, was inscribed, *M. Janssen, 101st Airborne, from G.C. *. I had it engraved before I gave it to you, she said softly. In case I forgot who it belonged to, Michael finished. I never did. The look she gave him then, vulnerable, hopeful, cautious, was like a door opening onto a future he'd long since surrendered. I don't know what happens now, Grace said honestly. I have a life here. Work that matters to me. As do I, Michael agreed. But perhaps, we could see each other again. Dinner, sometime. Grace's fingers closed around the damaged pin. I'd like that. As they walked back through the garden, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Michael thought about time and chance and the strange paths that led people apart and together again. He thought about a promise made in a moment of fear and hope, and kept through years of doubt. The rain had stopped entirely now. Ahead, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, illuminating wet leaves and pathways with sudden brilliance. The children's ward has a Christmas party each year, Grace said suddenly. For the patients who can't go home for the holidays. We could use another set of hands. Christmas Eve? Michael asked. She nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. For luck. As they reached the garden's edge, where the city reclaimed its dominion of concrete and noise, Grace reached for his hand. Her fingers twined with his, strong and sure as they had been in that darkened supply room a lifetime ago. Some promises, Michael realized, were never truly broken, only deferred, waiting patiently for their time to be fulfilled.